بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلوات وتم التسليمات على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So I'd like to thank Sidi Nazim for that very interesting introduction. And I'm very humbled and honored to be here again. I was here last Ramadan, which was in late June, I think. And to be back here again, I'm very pleased and honored to have that. I've known Shaykh Faraz for the better part of 20 years. Met him when I was 5. No, I'm just kidding. A little older than that. But it's not just cooperation. We have a long friendship, and it's one of those things that I treasure, because it's difficult to. So some of you are quite young, and you probably can't imagine knowing someone and being friends for 20 years. But it is one of those precious things that it's not too common. So if you have it, it's something to cherish, I think. So that's one of the things I definitely cherish. It seems like Sidi Nazim pretty much said everything I was going to say about Surah Kahf. He kind of made that introduction. But, you know, these investigative reporters, they jump the gun and they put the whole story out there, and it's already...
Not the whole story. Just the headline.
That's the headlines. But hopefully what we're trying to do tomorrow in the 4 sessions that we have, as Sidi Nazim mentioned, it's paradigmatic surah. There are certain paradigms. And one of the things about the Qur'an teaches you, it instructs us often in the forms of archetypes, which means that the parables, the stories, are not just mere stories to be recollected and have a nice history lesson about it. In fact, when we talk tomorrow about the surah, we'll find that many of the details that some of you may want to know, like what were the names of the people of the cave, how many were they, how long did they actually stay there or sleep, what happened after they were found out. The surah actually doesn't give you a lot of details, of finite, details about that, because that's not the point. But the point is the lessons that we can learn from them. And in that, as we know, the Qur'an is about 600 pages, 6,000 or so verses. It can't cover every aspect, every encounter that you will have in your life. And it's not meant to do that. It's meant to enlighten you. So even though the title, they gave it here, Giving Light to Surah Al-Kahf, it's actually the opposite. Surah Al-Kahf and the other surah of the Qur'an enlighten us, give light to us. So I was thinking a little about Surah Al-Kahf, and it's one of those surahs like Surah Yasin and Al-Waqi'ah that we are encouraged to recite regularly. And Surah Al-Kahf especially at least once a week on Fridays. And many of you know the hadith that have been reported about the merits of reciting this particular chapter of the Qur'an on Fridays, that it expiates one's sins from one Friday to the next. It is a protection from Dajjal, al-Masih al-Dajjal, or the Antichrist. Some other reports mention it's a protection from the punishment of the grave. And it's supposed to be recited every Friday. So I thought a little bit about this. Why every week? And why particularly as a protection from the Dajjal? So every week, it means that it's not just something to be kind of read and dispensed with, but even if you have a regular khatam or litany of Qur'an that you do, nevertheless, you'd still include Surah Al-Kahf. So it might be one of the most oft-recited chapters of the Qur'an if you are following the sunnah of reciting every Friday. And then additionally, this idea of the Masih al-Dajjal, that we, as a tenet of faith, we believe that this particular being, individual, will be, and there will be great trials and tribulations associated with him towards what we would call the end of days. And then if you look at Surah Al-Kahf, right, and the parables that are in it, you find, as mentioned by Sidi Nazim, the 4 major parables that we'll go over tomorrow. So the people of the cave, often referred to in the Judaic and Christian traditions as the 7 sleepers. You have the Sahab al-Jannatain, the 2 men of the gardens that they owned. You have Musa and Khidr, or Abd al-Salih, the righteous servant. And then you have Dhul Qarnayn. that many of the Mufassirun mention as being Alexander the Great. So you have things that predated by many, many, many years the Ba'atha, the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But yet somehow in each of them there's a particular archetype and paradigm for us to learn from. And we know that in the trials and tribulations associated with the Dajjal nor towards the end of days, that this will be a culminative process. In other words, it will culminate in that. It doesn't start with that. In other words, our view of history, or the Islamic worldview of history, if I'm so bold to say so, is one that is looking at successive decline, right? And our decline, some of them call it fasad al-zaman, doesn't mean that we will be declining in terms of the technological prowess and the things that we're able to do. So these people that we're talking about in Surah Kahf, they got around on the back of a donkey. And today we can fly in machines that go thousands times the speed, or 10,000 times the speed of the donkey. And we can create materials that can, if at one point when they were living, maybe there was 1 million people living on the face of the earth. We have things now that we can create, could probably kill all of them in one fell swoop. So it's not talking about this type of decline, but a decline in the most important facet, the most important aspect, and it's a decline in our own humanity. In other words, that which defines us as human beings. And what defines us as human beings is not the things that we can create, not the things that we can make, but rather the actualization of those attributes in the human being that are a reflection of the attributes of God. Because there is a correlation between the two. So knowledge, wisdom, compassion, mercy, the very things that we seek from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those are things that should be embedded within us. And those are things we should seek for our own selves. And so this decline that I'm talking about began with the death of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And there will be no prophets again. The only time we're going to get a minor reset when the Prophet Isa alayhi salam comes, but not so much as a prophet with a new revelation, but as a follower of the last prophet, Muhammad ﷺ. Then we get a reset. But until then, there is this steady period of decline in our own humanity. And that means we may have B Dajjal at the end, right, with capital T-H-E, right, or capital D, but we're going to have many, many Dajjalin, right, many, many people who incorporate the attributes of an imposter who sows corruption and sows havoc on the earth. And you don't have to look that far to find it. And I'm not talking about Donald Trump, and I'm talking about Vladimir Putin. I'm not talking about Bashar al-Assad. I'm talking about your very own self. Everybody within themselves has this jabarut, right? This type of tyranny within themselves. We have the potential for it. And one of the things about your humanity is you have to realize you do have the potential for that. That just because you are the son or the daughter of fulan and fulana, or this person and that person, or you're from this particular town, or lineage, or tribe, that doesn't make you immune. And one of the things about the believer is that they have a thiqah, they have a confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at the same time, their iman is one where they realize that they can never truly fulfill all of its aspects. That's why many of the theologians, they said, it's valid for one to say, "Ana mu'min insha'Allah." Khilaf in the Maturidiyya, I think, right? So it means that I am a mu'min insha'Allah. Some of the other theologians said, no, that sounds like kufr because you're not sure if you're a believer or not. But the ones who said it is allowed and it's valid to say that, what they meant is, I want to believe that I have a true iman, I have a sincere one, and that it will ultimately be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what we teeter on is whether this is going to be accepted by God, right? And that automatically puts you in a position of humility, right? The Qur'an Surah Al-Kahf, what is the first verse of Surah Al-Kahf? الحمد لله الذي أنزل الكتاب على عبده ولم يجعل له عوجا. Praise to the one who has revealed the book to his slave. سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى. Glory to the one who has taken on the night journey his servant slave. So when we talk about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in his highest status, right? He would say, إنما أنا رسول ونبي وعبد. Right? I am a messenger and I am a prophet, but I am a slave of God, first and foremost. So your highest recognition of your humanity is recognizing, first and foremost, that you're a servant of God, that you're a slave. And that complete agency is not for you, it's all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Surah Al-Kahf begins this way, reminding us, right, that this book was revealed to the abd, to the slave of God. When Musa alayhi salam meets al-abd al-salih, right, the rightful or righteous servant that we know as the Sayyidina al-Khidr, again, it's referring to him as a slave. And this is a man who knew things Moses didn't know, who had some knowledge that Musa alayhi salam didn't have, referred to as the slave. So there's a lesson in that for us, that in order for us to actualize the most important and beautiful aspects of humanity, we have to be slaves. And like the Prophet ﷺ said, and I mentioned earlier today in the khutbah, you're a slave to that which you love. So whatever that you love, right? Sayyidina Nazim referred to it earlier with the verse, right? وَاتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَى. The ones that take their hawa, their caprice, their own whim, their desires, as their gods. We don't have people today really making golden calves and putting them in Times Square and worshiping them. Or what's your major square here in Toronto? The CN Tower. Is it CN Tower?
No, that's CBC.
Oh.
Dundas Square.
Dundas Square. Right? You don't have people, even though on Wall Street they have that bull. We don't do that anymore, really. Right? That's seen as primitive and but people still worship false gods. Right? The number one false god is you. Right? Is your own whim, your own caprice, your own desires. If they're leading you around, right? Because what does it mean to worship something? Does it mean that you have to prostrate before it? No, it doesn't mean that. But it means that it is the source of your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations. It takes up most of your waking time thinking about it. It's a thing that when you wake up in the morning, that's what you think about. And before you go to sleep, that's what you think about. So if you wake up in the morning and you think about, let's see, did my bank account get bigger over the night? And then when you go to sleep and you say, did it decrease or did we do okay today? Then you have to question, who's your God? What is the thing that you're concerned with? Because this deen, Islam, it's not just about doing the ritual aspects of it. I don't think any of you all would be here if you believe that. Right? It's not just doing the 5 prayers and the zakah and hajj and we're done. Islam ala khams. Islam has been built upon 5. Not Islam is these 5 in particular. So that means there are means to realizing what Islam is really about. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created the jinn and the ins except so that they may worship me. And there's a tafsir Ibn Abbas, so that they may know me. We are the only beings on the face of the earth, terrestrial beings that is, that can know things. Animals don't know things like we know. In other words, to have an aspect of the divine faculty, right? Because our souls are actually malakuti. They're of the divine realm. They're not of this realm. We're spirits, but we're occupying terrestrial bodies temporarily. But really, we don't belong to this world. We belong to the next world. This is just a temporary phase for us. So we're really of the same kind of as the angels, who will never occupy this type of terrestrial body, except intermittently. But they're of the next world. So are we. So in order to realize your humanity, you have to lessen your dependence and your reliance and your aggrandizing of your terrestrial body. Al-alim al-hissi, right? The things that are only known by senses. And these are some of the lessons of Surah Al-Kahf. For example, Khidr alayhi salam does things in front of Moses that are reprehensible from the outward side of it, killing the young boy, rebuilding the wall for the town of people who didn't want to feed them, putting a hole in a sound boat that was for orphans, and now they don't have one. It doesn't seem right, right, from the outward aspect of it, but from the inward aspect of it, right, which some of them refer to as the haqiqah, right? So there's sharia, which is the outward aspects, and the haqiqah, and they never contradict. They complement one another. But if all that we go by is on the outward edifices, the outward aspects of everything in life, then you will not know life. Then you will not know reality, right? All that you'll know is the outward aspects, and you won't know anything else. Before they discovered the quantum level, right, they thought all that there was what we can see. Then they make these instruments that can see to, 10 to the negative 9th degree or greater, and looking at something. And they saw a completely different world. They saw something that resembled the celestial world. They saw lots of empty space, and they saw things that appeared to move, and they saw things moving so fast and so irregularly, they couldn't figure out, is that a particle, is that a wave? Till this day, they don't know, is that a particle, is that a wave? So quantum theory, Heisenberg uncertainty principle, all of that is based upon the idea that if we look at something close enough, we arrive to the conclusion we can't know what it is. But yet Muslims knew that a long time ago. That not all that you see is what you get. And that there are hidden realities, but nevertheless, still part of reality. It's still there, it's still real, even though you can't perceive it with your senses. And the Quranic proofs, they're appealing to our sense of understanding, our ability to understand these hidden realities. So Surah Kahf, like I said, less emphasis on kind of the outward minutiae, the details and aspects of the stories as they occurred, but more upon the underlying principles of them. That's why it's something we should read every Friday, not just read it, but contemplate it. Because, as I said, we are in a decline, a moral decline, a human decline. And that means, along the way, we are going to find many Dajjals, many imposters. Like I said, the biggest one is your own self. We're all the biggest imposters. We all put a very nice public image and profile out on Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat, whatever it is that people do. And, people think that's our life. Like, here's my picture with Gary Trudeau and selfie, and, people think like I know him on a first name basis, or Syrian didn't do that, but I'm just saying in general. So, Gary's his father? No, Gary Trudeau is Doonesbury. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, yeah, got it mixed up. Justin Trudeau. Sorry, I didn't mean to offend the Canadians, especially if I'm going to seek refugee status with him. So, don't want to do that. Got to get his name right on the application. But so, what was that? So we're the biggest imposters, and we have to recognize that. And there are imposters in other ways too, right? Not everything that you see is real. And I bring up social media and Facebook, but if all that you know in life is Facebook, the world is a really dark and narcissistic and ugly place. Really, Yanni. Get away from it for a while, shut it off for a day or two, go outside and walk and just meet people and interact with people. It seems like a completely different world, right? Even the world of, back in the 40s and 50s, people were complaining about the print media and how it distorts things. And that if you only just interacted with people, right? Some of them said that, I'm going to stop reading the paper and I'm just going to stick to Newton and Euclid and the philosophers because, what they're putting out there, it was the era of yellow journalism, as it were, and it's distorting reality. And once we lose our ability, our faculty to understand reality, we lose ourselves. We don't know who we are anymore. And everything becomes distorted. And we live in this type of internal dystopia where everything or nothing makes sense. And, we know at least when we're on the prayer rug and we have our heads in sujood, everything makes sense. That is the one time during your day, you have absolute certainty everything makes sense. It's the one time during the day, shaitan can't do a single thing to you. He's completely defeated. He retreats to the corner until you finish in your sujood. But sujood, right, our heads are lowered and our hearts are higher. That's the whole parable. That's the whole thing. Lower this, this bodily form of yours, and you will be elevated, right? Don't pay it too much attention. It's an amana. That's all it is. It's a trust. You're a steward over it. You've been given a trust to take care of and to, manage it. But don't make it the whole object and purpose of your life. Feeding it, clothing it, adorning it, perfecting its image of it. What a waste of time. What a waste of a life. Because when you get in the grave, after a few months, maybe a few years, none of that will remain. Just bones, if that. So these are realities, right? And Surah Al-Kahf and the other surahs, as we'll see inshallah when we go over tomorrow, some of the ayahs and as we go through some of the tafsir, what the ulama have said, will show us that an approach to how the Qur'an inshallah can enlighten us. And that it should be that means. It's not something to be put on the shelf, to be read once a year in Ramadan and then put again away. But one of the things that people who keep a regular litany of Qur'an, you will start hearing the Qur'an in your ears even when you're not reading it. And if you start to understand the meanings of it, you will see things in it that when you have situations in life and you think, wait, the verse that says this is somehow this is applicable here. I'm not really sure how, but it's applicable in some way. And you make it, some of the ulama, like Al-Ghazali and others, they said that when the dhikr of Allah and even the Qur'an becomes so much that you get to the degree where it becomes kind of defines you, even physically. It becomes mixed with your blood and your bones and your skin so that they're, inseparable. That's why some of the hadith said, make dhikr of Allah until they say you're crazy. That's okay. حَتَّى يَقُولَ عَلَيْكَ مَجْنُونَ. Fine. That's okay. Why? Because you can never do too much dhikr. You can never do too much praise of the Prophet ﷺ. Don't listen to those people. They have no idea what they're talking about. How can you have too much of a good thing? We don't believe in that. There's no such thing as too much of a good thing. If it's a good thing, you can have it in abundance, right? Especially when we're talking about the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reflection on the verses, the ayahs of the Qur'an and of the various surah of the Qur'an. And hopefully we will be able to explore some of that tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.